Being 4th of July weekend, it's wonderful that we have someone from the military this year.
Yeah.
Carrie Stillwell entered the Army in 1978 and served until 1981. She went to jump school directly after basic training to become a parachute rigger at the very time that the Women's Army Corps was disbanded. So she was in the first non-modified, non-segregated class in jump school history. She became one of the first women to graduate from jump school alongside the men. Carrie will explain more about her biography during her presentation.
First of all, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Ann. And thank you all for being here. I'm truly honored, truly. To begin, I'd like to share some history of the role of women in the U.S. Armed Forces. Throughout American history, women have served their country with courage and ingenuity, often without recognition. Take, for example, Deborah Sampson. In 1782, Deborah joined the U.S. military disguised as a man. Her only goal was to serve her country in the American Revolution in the same capacity as the men. She served for 17 months until an injury put her in the hospital and her secret was discovered. Her commanding officer discharged her and thanked her for her service. From Deborah Sampson in 1782 until I joined in 1978, women have long found ways to serve, even though the doors weren't fully open. I'm going to read some examples, and I'm going to read them because Ross Peterson is here, and I don't want to get anything wrong. In the Revolutionary War, along with Deborah Sampson, women, mostly family members, traveled alongside soldiers. They found food, cooked, cleaned, mended uniforms, and tended to wounds. Although some of the women were paid, they were not considered members of the armed forces. In the Civil War, close to 20,000 women lent their skills as nurses, spies, aides on the battlefield. Again, some were paid, but they were not considered members of the military. In World War I, women served as nurses, telephone operators, truck drivers, and in clerical roles. Over 30,000 women volunteered. At that time, they were considered members of the armed forces and were paid, but as soon as the war was over, they were released to go back home. In World War II, over 350,000 women served. Along with the same positions they filled in previous wars, they also served as test pilots, cryptographers, and mechanics, but they were members of the auxiliary branches that were created, the WACs, the WASPs, and the WAVES. In 1944, the WASPs, Women's Air Force Service Pilots, were disbanded. They were sent home without military benefits or recognition. In 1948, President Truman signed the Women's Armed Service Integration Act into law, which allowed women to officially serve as full permanent members of the armed forces. At that time, the WAVES, this is a big one, women accepted for volunteer emergency service, they were disbanded. Most returned to civilian life. Some stayed to help with demobilization. Only the WACs, the Women's Army Corps, remained. And the only blemish on that act was women were automatically discharged if they became pregnant. In the Korean War, about 86,000 women served primarily as nurses and MASH units, and also took on some administrative and logistical roles. In the Vietnam War, 265,000 American women served, mostly as nurses, though some worked in intelligence, communications, and support roles in country. In 1973, the Army began opening more training opportunities to women. That December, Joyce Kutch and Rita Johnson became the first females to attend Army Jump School. Although their physical training and instruction were modified and they were kept separated from the men, they do have the honor of being considered the first female paratroopers in the U.S. Army. In 1975, women were allowed to stay in the military if they became pregnant. And in 1978, the Women's Army Corps was disbanded. Now all who serve are soldiers in the U.S. Army. And this is where I come in. In January of 1978, I was a senior in high school in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I just knew I wasn't going to stay there. So when an Army recruiter visited the high school, I saw an opportunity. 2 weeks after talking to him and 5 months before graduation, I was on a bus to the Army processing station in Milwaukee. After rounds of tests, both mental and physical, it was determined I would be the perfect fit for the exciting job of parachute rigger. Their exact words were, you get to jump out of airplanes. I agreed, and the next morning I signed on the dotted line, raised my right hand, and swore an oath to defend this great nation. On the bus home, I remember thinking, I'm going to be a soldier, an airborne parachute rigger. And then I remembered, I've got to go home and tell my mother. You don't know fear until you've looked into the eyes of that tiny little Irish woman. But she eventually forgave me for joining and made me promise that I wouldn't tell her about a jump until I had landed safely. 2 weeks after graduation, I was on a bus on my way to Fort McClellan, Alabama for basic training. I was assigned to Delta Company, and we were told that we would be their last class of the Women's Army Corps. Meaning when we go on to our advanced individual training, we will no longer be segregated from the men. So when I go to jump school, my training will not be modified. I will do everything the men have to do with the men, and was told they're gonna hate me for it. There were 48 women in Delta Company, and I was the only one moving on to jump school. But I first had to pass their PT test to qualify. So every day after basic was done, I got to do additional airborne training while everybody else got to go upstairs and rest. The PT test consisted of 60 sit-ups and 60 push-ups that had to be done within 2 minutes each, and then run a 7-minute mile in full fatigue uniform and boots. The thing that made this test so brutal is not only did I have to do it after a full day's training, but it had to be concurrent. If you missed any one of the 3 parts, you had to start all over again. I got the sit-ups and the push-ups done with no problem. I just couldn't break that 7-minute mile. Every day as I would run, Drill Sergeant Osborne would yell things like, "Just quit now. They don't want you there. You'll never make it." There were days, many days, I didn't care very much for Drill Sergeant Osborne. It took me 4 weeks, 3 days, and 11 hours to hit 7 minutes. And when Drill Sergeant Osborne had to sign off on my PT test, I ran upstairs through the bay filled with 47 women, sat in the stairwell and cried. 3 weeks later, I was on a bus on my way to jump school after graduating basic, and with a fair amount of trepidation, I was almost kind of looking forward to it. U.S. Army Airborne School, Fort Benning, Georgia, is a grueling 3-week course that tests both mind and body. It's not just physically demanding, it is mental warfare. How tough is jump school? Since its inception in 1942, the dropout rate has hovered around 50%. One of the first things I remember the instructors, known as Black Hats, saying was, "In jump school, you run until your feet and legs are tough. So when you land, only the ground is hurting." Our class started with a little over 400 trainees, and we were identified by numbers on our helmets. The men's helmets were numbered 1 through 400 plus, And the 5 women that started that first class, our helmets were labeled W1 through W5. With the last name Stillwell, I was assigned W5. They called me Whiskey 5, which thankfully sounded a lot better than Woman 5. Week 1 in jump school is ground week. Every morning began with formation inspection. You had to be squared away. Your uniform pressed and clean, boots shined to perfection, grooming standards sharp. Standing at attention meant perfect posture, eyes locked forward. 1 gig in any area put you in the dreaded gig platoon, and you did not want to be in the gig platoon. There was no breaks. While everybody else was waiting in line, or they got a chance to catch their breath by being given a break for 5 minutes, we were running in place, doing jumping jacks, push-ups, whatever other exercise the black hats would call out. It was brutal. Even meals were eaten standing up. And was I in the gig platoon? Just once. My boots weren't shiny enough, and that mistake never happened again. After inspection came PT, the daily dozen, and then a run of at least 4 miles a day. The runs were done in formation, staying in step, and singing cadence. To make things a little more difficult on the women, they put us in the back of the formation. And trying to keep up with the longer strides of some of the men in front was nearly impossible for some. If you fall back, you're disqualified. Okay, the rest of the day was spent drilling on how to exit aircraft and land safely, practicing the 5 points of contact parachute landing fall, or PLF. We started on 1-foot platforms and then moved up to 4-foot platforms and cycled through. Jump, land, do push-ups, run to the end of the line, and repeat. One of the more anxiety-inducing drills was the 12-foot platform. You're hooked up to a harness, and you're hanging and dangling like a pendulum while the black hat holds the rope. You never know when he's gonna let go. But when he does, you drop, suddenly. Every time you think you're ready for it, you're not. But it teaches you fast to always be prepared to fall. I remember my first PLF off the 12-foot platform. I landed so hard, I thought I broke something. The black hat just stood there and laughed and shouted, "That's what we call a controlled crash. Give me 20 and do it again." And I did, over and over. By the end of week 1, only Whiskey 3 and I remained. The other 3 women and many men had either quit or were disqualified. So week 2 in jump school is Tower Week. By now, some of the trainees started to accept that Whiskey 3 and I weren't going anywhere, that we could actually hack it as paratroopers. And that tiny bit of acceptance made the training just a little easier. Every day in Tower Week started the same as ground week: inspection, PT, and a long run. Then it was off to the 34-foot towers. These towers simulated an aircraft door. So we would get strapped into a harness and hooked up to a cable. We would stand in the aircraft door waiting for the black hat to yell C-130 or Huey, and then they'd yell go. We would exit the door then in proper body position, which is head down, elbows in, hands on your reserve, feet and knees together. All while counting 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000. It's a 4 count when jumping a C-130. Or we would count to 8 1,000 if we were jumping from a Huey helicopter. Once the count was done, you look up, grab your risers, and ride the zip line down. When you're riding the zip line down, then black hats on the ground would yell up a specific malfunction and watch you go through the movements to correct that malfunction. It was all about building muscle memory. React, don't panic. 3 qualified jumps, or 3 jumps were needed to qualify to move on in Tower Week. One of the toughest drills of week 2, Tower Week, was the suspended harness. 2 hours of suspended agony as we hung midair, learning how to steer, control the chute, work through malfunctions. I remember watching sweat drip off my boots. We hung so long that my legs went numb. But nobody dared complain. The black hats circled like hawks. No smiles, no sympathy, just cold, calculating silence. You earned every inch of progress. Then came cutaway practice. We'd lay flat on our back in full parachute gear with the parachute stretched out behind us. Then a massive wind machine was turned on, and that filled your chute with air to the point to where it started dragging you across the drop zone. The goal here was to release one side of your harness to force your chute to collapse, or risk being dragged way far away. And it did happen. And when it did happen, we were disqualified. If the Black Hats passed you on everything in Tower Week, it ended with the 250-foot tower. This is as close as we got to actually jumping out of a plane. No ropes, no cables, no zip lines, just you, your chute, and gravity. You're strapped to your parachute and hooked to a tow line which brought you up 250 feet. Your chute was already deployed and rigged. So when you got to the top, you waited. You hung and you waited. And then they dropped you. And the goal was to steer your way down to a perfect landing. It was a one and done situation. If you aced it, you moved on. If you messed it up, well, you get to start jump school all over again. If you wanted to. Many didn't. Week 3 is jump week. This is where it gets real. We started like every other day in jump school. Then we jump. No second chances. Just you and a C-130 at 1,250 feet in the air. It would be 5 jumps total that week. 4 day jumps, 1 in full combat gear, and 1 night jump. Jump 1, Monday. The Black Hats tried one last trick to get Whiskey 3 and I to drop out. They put us in the doors of that airplane miles before we hit the drop zone. Their trick didn't work though. When the green light came on, meaning we were over the drop zone, my Black Hat licked his fingers, smacked my rear, and out the door I went. You do the roar of the plane, the jolt of the static line, the rush of the air. It was terrifying and thrilling all at the same time. Then there was a moment in the sky where silence meets awe. It's a moment that stays with you forever. Now, I took my training seriously, but until I heard a Black Hat on the drop zone yell, "Prepare to land," I realized I didn't do anything I was supposed to do when jumping out of an airplane. My arms were folded on my reserve. I didn't even check to see if my chute deployed. So much for muscle memory. I landed all right. Tuesday was jump 2. That was our night jump. There's nothing quite like floating through a pitch black sky. It's eerie and surreal all at the same time. You had to scan the darkness, and you're squinting to try to find fellow paratroopers and hoping not to bump into somebody midair. There was a handful of lights that marked the drop zone, which was barely enough to guide us in, but somehow I hit the ground with a textbook landing. Wednesday, jump 3, fear crept in. I got scared. The knee knocking kind of scared. Could have been caused by the 50 pounds of combat gear that was strapped to me, or maybe I finally realized what it was I was about to do. I kept hearing Drill Sergeant Osborne's voice in my head saying, "You're never going to make it. You're going to fail." Then I remembered the fears we don't face become our limits, and I wasn't about to let this be my limit, so I jumped. And just like jump 2, it was textbook. After that jump, the knee-knocking fear was gone. And I learned a lesson that day that has stayed with me all my life. Feel the fear, do it anyway. On the drop zone after jump 3, the Black Hats said they were going to send a C-130 back up and asked for volunteers. Almost every hand went up, including mine. They selected 64 jumpers, and I was one of them. We went up 2 more times that day. Jumps 4 and 5 were a success. Right there on the drop zone, they lined up 63 men and me for the jump weight ceremony. One of the instructors, Sergeant Fox, stepped in front of me and said, "I have never done this to a woman before," and then proceeded to slam the jump wings into my chest. Blood wings. I've never been more proud. But as proud as I was at the time, it didn't even occur to me that I had just become the first woman paratrooper to train and graduate with the men. And for those of you, wondering, Whiskey 3 did graduate 2 days later. The very next morning, I was on a bus headed to Fort Lee, Virginia. I arrived at rigger school, and something profound happened. There was a piece of mail waiting for me there. It was a card from Drill Sergeant Osborne. He was congratulating me on completing jump school. He went on to say he knew all along that I would pass the course. This taught me a lot about motivation and changed my perception of Drill Sergeant Osborne. A person I thought had disdain for me wasn't disdain, he was challenging me. He knew before I even did that I had what it took to be a paratrooper. And this gave me the confidence to face and overcome many, many challenges in my life. Rigger school was a completely different experience for me. It wasn't easier, just different. Some of the instructors and male trainees treated me as an equal. It was still physically demanding. Every morning begins with inspection, PT, and runs ranging from 4 to 12 miles. And push-ups all day long. Packing parachutes is all about upper body strength. So in rigger school, you do push-ups for punishment, and in a strange way, it's for reward as well. During formation, if you missed a belt loop or a button, or your boots weren't shined, or you had a thread hanging somewhere from your uniform, you heard, do push-ups. For chow, or at the end of day waiting for fallout, you heard, do push-ups. And the big one for me was mail call. I have a very big family, and some of them love to write. So you get called out of formation for every individual piece of mail you receive. And before they hand the piece of mail to you, you heard, do push-ups. And when they say do push-ups, that's 20 push-ups each time they say it. So getting a big pile of mail was a reward and a curse. Rigger school is 3 months of packing and repairing personnel and cargo chutes, and rigging heavy drop loads, jeeps, trucks, tanks, ammunition, food, fuel bladders, anything that would fit in the back of a C-130 or C-141. Riggers live by the oath, I will be sure always. One mistake means someone doesn't come home. Part of our final test came at the end of the first month of training. We had to jump using a parachute and a reserve we packed ourselves. They didn't tell us until after we had packed about a dozen or so that day, and no, we didn't get to choose which ones we wanted. I remember checking the logbook attached to the chute that was assigned to me and seeing my name there. It was surreal. Was I nervous? Absolutely. But I can honestly say everyone else in that C-130 felt the exact same way. It was the quietest flight I had ever been on. But we all made it to the ground safely without a single reserve being deployed. By the end of the 3-month course, I stood proud, took the parachute rigger's oath, and was named honor graduate. And after 6 months of training, I was finally home on leave. In January of 1979, I arrived at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Oh my God.
So my figure it out training kicked in. I grabbed my risers and started shaking, trying to get some air back in to deploy my canopy. Nothing. I looked down, the ground is coming up fast. At that moment, all I could think about was all the family members on the drop zone seeing me and convinced that I was their loved one. I got angry. I got so angry thinking of what those poor people were going through that I looked up, I grabbed my risers, and I shook them with every ounce of energy I had left. Just as I was about to cut away and release my reserve, my canopy did catch some wind and redeployed, which slowed me down just enough to hit the ground without breaking every bone in my body. However, I did hit so hard, I shattered the balls and heels of both feet, blew off 5 toenails, and broke 8 toes. To give you an idea on how fast I was falling, I was the second to the last out of 64 paratroopers, first to land. At the hospital, the doctors wanted to put me on a medical profile, meaning I would have to continue my service wearing white gym shoes. I was not going to go on medical profile. So I bought a bigger pair of boots, wore 3 pair of socks, and powered through. Well, there were great strides for women in the military at the time. We still weren't allowed to serve in combat. Female parachute riggers couldn't even leave the country because our job was considered too close to combat. I couldn't believe after everything I worked so hard for, I couldn't advance like the men could as a rigger. So after 3 years, I received my honorable discharge and got out. I went on to work for UPS, and 34 years later, I retired with a career I was proud of. I've always found it fascinating to talk with others who've served in the military, regardless of branch or length of time served. Their core values stay the same: commitment, courage, discipline, honor, and pride. Those values don't fade away when the uniform comes off. They stay with you and shape everything we do. Today, I continue to serve in my own way. I'm a proud member of the American Legion and currently serve as commander of the Honor Guard at Post 133 in Maricopa, Arizona. I've joined several veteran Army and Airborne groups on social media, and through them, I've reconnected with a few people I've served with. Still hoping to find Whiskey 3. Around this time last year, something incredible happened. Or something incredible to me. I was contacted by the Phantom Airborne Brigade. They're a nonprofit organization that gives veterans and active duty paratroopers a chance to jump the way they did when they served. They invited me to be a part of their first ever all-female stick. What's a stick? When loading an aircraft, or bird as we called it, they divided the paratroopers evenly, lined half up on the left side and half up on the right side. Each side is called a stick. As for the invite, I jumped at the chance. After getting the green light from my family, of course. I did promise them this would be my only jump. On November 2nd, 2024 in Tavares, Florida, I was able to make the jump with 9 other women, one of whom I served with. She was Whiskey 75 and went through everything I did only a year later. Here's a little video of that jump. My name is Carrie Stillwell. I was in the Army from 78 to 81. I was the last of the WACs in basic training, and because the Women's Army Corps was disbanded at that time, I became the first woman to graduate jump school with the men, non-segregated, non-modified PT. Exhilarating, exciting, scary. They didn't want us there. We persevered, graduated, blood wings. Everything was fantastic. Back then, female parachute riggers, that was my MOS. It was considered too close to combat, so they didn't allow us to leave the States. I didn't want to spend 20 years at Bragg, so I got out after my first enlistment. I joined a women's military group on Facebook and was contacted by Dawn asking if I would be interested in doing this all-female stick. My first jump in 43 years, first jump with Phantom. Every emotion. Every emotion, 360, it's thrilling, it's exhilarating, I'm a little nervous, it's been a long time. I'll let you know when I'm in the water if my knees were knocking before that. It's a memory I'll cherish, absolutely. I'm hoping it's like riding a bike. I'm thrilled. I'm just thrilled beyond belief. I'm a 7-year-old in a 64-year-old's body. State Air Force.
down, I'm on top of the world. I'm on top of the world. I'm on top of the world. Wait in line. I've been breaking these walls in my mind, and I'm on top of the line. I've been waiting for this all my life. Good things never come to those who wait in line. I've been breaking these walls in my mind, and they're breaking down. I'm on top of the world. I'm on top of the world.
Airborne!
Before I wrap this up, I want to tell you a little bit about that plane you just saw. She's something special. She's a C-47 named Tico Bell, and she took part in the D-Day invasion of Normandy. She dropped paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne just outside of St. Mary-Glise, while simultaneously towing a glider also filled with paratroopers. Can you even begin to imagine the amount of courage packed into that one plane? It's phenomenal when I think about it. Tico Bell went on to serve in many more missions, flying under the US, Norwegian, and Danish Air Forces before being retired in 1982, where she was brought back to the US. She's a beautiful bird, full of history, strength, and stories, and I felt honored just to be a small part of her history. Phantom's goal this year is part of their Veterans Day celebration is to have an all-female bird. I was invited to take part in that as well. It's never easy to break a promise made to the people you love, and it's even harder to explain why you have to. I promised last year's jump would be my only one, and I meant it at the time, but something keeps pulling me back. I think the best explanation comes from a quote with ties to Leonardo da Vinci. Once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will always long to return. On November 8th, in Eustis, Florida, I will be returning to the sky once again, this time as part of Phantom Airborne Brigade's first ever all-female bird. We will be jumping from Tico Bell at 1,500 feet and landing in Lake Eustis.
Are you going to pack your own chute for the next jump?
You know, if I got there early enough, I could. I would just have to pass a test first.
Oh.
The chutes are a little different now than they were in 78 to 81 when I packed and jumped them. They are steerable. You saw the little toggles. I mean, seriously, that's all they have to do to turn. That's it. We had to climb all the way up the risers to get to the skirt of our chute. But I could, we don't get there early enough to do it. Yeah.
Do you train for this now? I mean, all the training you went through the first time, do you have to do a 75-foot jump?
Then we do what they call sustainment training, and they have a mock door there as well. There's really nothing you can train for except for remembering how to jump out of the aircraft, and then they go through the obvious. If there's a plane malfunction at 1,500 feet, you're going to jump. If there's a plane malfunction at this, we'll try to land. If there's a plane malfunction at this, we kneel down and say a prayer. Because that's the training we go through before the jump. Yeah.
Why over water and who picks you up?
Oh, yeah, very good question. Over water is because if I landed on the ground, I would break in half. This is a wonderfully organized event. The Phantom Airborne Brigade has been around since the 80s, 1980. And it's always in Florida. And there is a couple of boat clubs that volunteer their services and report to the lake we're going to jump in. And there are 22 boats in the water to retrieve the 20, Tico Bell brings 20 at a time, 10 in one pass, 10 in another. And each boat is assigned a number of a person that comes out the door. They keep an eye on them and then go to where they land in the water to retrieve them before the alligators get you.
When your chute was impacted by the other person, had you let that chute go, would your reserve have then hit that other person?
No, because once he realized his mistake, he moved away. Yeah. Yeah. At that time, back when I was in, you had to cut away before you pulled your reserve. Now they say it's better to have more than one chute above your head. So if there was a malfunction, you pull your reserve without even having to cut away from your main. No worries. Yeah.
Do you ever use the triangular type chutes like the Golden Lights or any of that?
No. This is all military static land jumping.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
These 40 plus years since your training, have you ever looked back and thought there could have been a better way? Or I know that's military training, that's been done for many years, but do you feel like some of that, it's, you said at a while, for a little bit it undermined your confidence, but you could see where it was supposed to be helpful, and I don't know if you ever would.
Yeah, I'll try to answer the question the way my brain is interpreting it. I was very proud of my service. I wanted to stay in, but I wasn't the kind of person that could be told no. If I know I can do it, I want to do it just like everybody else does. So did it hurt knowing that I couldn't do with what people I served with were doing? Yes, it did. It wasn't an easy decision to make to get out because I did want to stay in the service, but I had a pretty good path in the civilian world that I took, so everything was good. Did that answer your question?
Sort of. I just wanted the actual training, basic training, whatever. Would you felt like from your experience? Was there a better way? I don't know.
Oh no.
So, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
That PT test builds up exactly what you need built up to land without injuring yourself all the time. The push-ups, the sit-ups, and the running build the muscles you're going to fall on more often than not, and saves injury. So it was needed. It absolutely was needed. Yeah.
What were some of your tactics that you used mentally or physically to kind of get over that fear, that huge fear that could stop you?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, what tactics did I use to get over that fear that I was feeling? I think you all heard me say I was from a big family. When you come from a family with a lot of kids, there's a lot of competition, a lot. So it in itself makes you tough, and I took that with me. Everybody I was in basic with, and jump school and rigger school with, they were my siblings, and I had to beat them at everything. Yes?
Did your toenails ever grow back?
Did my toenails ever grow back? This is a very sore subject. They tried to, but because my toes were broken, and they don't fix them. You just walk on them until they don't hurt anymore. So they became deformed. So the beds continue to get injured, blisters. So no, I have 2 feet with only 5 toenails. Yeah.
May I say I admire you and respect you, and thank you for your service.
It really was my pleasure. That is my answer to everybody that says that. It was my pleasure to serve. It really was, but thank you very much.
You're very welcome, but what I really want to know is how many push-ups can you still do?
Unfortunately, I'm down to like 3. On a good day. Yes.
I don't understand. You left the UP. For 17 years, I traveled there just to go fishing because I thought it was wonderful.
Well, the part I didn't say is I was born and raised in Chicago.
Oh.
And they didn't move us up there until my junior year of high school.
Oh.
Yes. I couldn't leave fast enough. Yeah.
I thought that was the reason why you left the UP is because you had a bear shirt on.
That's right.
That's right. That's you weren't allowed up there.
Yeah, you know, I wore that because we're a big football family, and I saw a blip online that they wanted stories for their Veterans Day game, their Veterans Day pregame TV show. So I wrote in and I said, hey, you know, this is what I'm doing for Veterans Day. And they're like, would you wear a Bears jersey? And I'm like, absolutely. So then we sent that video to them and they actually showed it before the Bears game. On November 10th. You good? Yes.
What happened to W3?
You know, I do still try to find her. It's very difficult with women from back then because you have their maiden names. So it's hard. It's very, very hard. I've found other people I have served with, but I cannot find her. Her name is Marilyn Olmstead. If anybody knows her, point her in my direction. But I look all the time. All the time. All right, thank you very much.
Change of view, so pack the parachute.